I was never supposed to talk about Peru. The mission doesn't exist on any record, not even the black files. No satellite logs, no transport manifests, nothing. Officially, I was never there. But I remember every sound, every vibration in that cursed valley. It's strange how silence can echo in your head years later, like it's still calling for you. We were told it was a simple recon job, standard special forces extraction. A small team of 7 dropped into the Andean highlands under the cover of night. The orders were vague: recover sensitive materials from a location that wasn't on any map. No coordinates, no village names, just a red marker scribbled over mountain terrain on a briefing slide. We were briefed in Lima, flown out in an unmarked C-130, and told to forget everything that came before wheels up. No insignias, no patches, just men, weapons, and a mission carved in silence. The helicopter ride to insertion was tense. No chatter, no jokes. Just the thumping of rotor blades and the pilot's voice cracking over the radio. Wind shifting again. You could feel the turbulence before you could see it. The air was thin, biting cold, and smelled faintly of metal, like blood. Our guide, a Peruvian intelligence liaison named Vargas, sat quietly beside me. He wore no uniform, no gear, just a rosary around his wrist. When I asked him what was so special about the valley, he didn't answer right away. He just muttered something in Spanish under his breath. I caught one word: diocese. Gods. The pilot circled once before setting us down in a clearing that barely fit the bird. Vargas refused to get off. He pointed to the dark ridges ahead and said, "You'll hear it before you see it." Then he crossed himself and looked away as we jumped. We hit the ground hard. Cold fog immediately swallowed us, thick as smoke. It wasn't just mist, it had weight to it, like the air was pressing back. We moved in formation, low and deliberate. No birds, no bugs, just the crunch of boots on rock and the occasional hiss of wind between the cliffs. My compass spun like it was drunk. The GPS flickered nonsense coordinates that put us somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Every bit of tech went haywire the moment we stepped off that LZ. That's not unusual in mountain terrain, but this was different. It wasn't interference. It felt like something didn't want to be found. We kept climbing. The higher we went, the quieter it got, until even our breathing seemed too loud. Somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard something grinding. Not movement, more like rock shifting against rock, miles away but close enough to feel in your chest. We found the ruins just before dawn, carved straight into the mountainside, half buried by centuries of landslides. It didn't look man-made at first. The lines were too clean, too deliberate, but eroded in a way that made no sense. Sergeant Klein, our point man, ran his hand across one of the stone slabs and froze. There were carvings, crude, worn, but unmistakably humanoid. Tall figures, blank faces, arms stretched skyward. Around them were smaller shapes bowing low. I snapped a few photos, though I doubt the camera captured anything clear through that fog. The longer I looked at the carvings, the more uneasy I felt. The proportions were wrong. The arms too long, the hands too many fingers, and the eyes, those hollow sockets, seemed to stare right through you. Klein joked that the Incas must have worshipped giants. Nobody laughed. Even our interpreter stayed quiet. Vargas had told us the locals never came here. Said they called this place Huanca Pucara, Fortress of Stone Spirits. There were old legends about mountain gods who slept beneath the Andes, giants turned to rock by the sun. He said one of them woke once before, centuries ago, and wiped out a whole tribe overnight. We dismissed it as folklore, something to scare kids. But when we found the entrance tunnel, hidden beneath a collapsed arch, that's when I started to wonder if maybe the legends had roots in something real. The tunnel wasn't natural. Smooth walls, symmetrical grooves, and a depth that swallowed our flashlight beams. Something about it felt wrong, like we were standing at the mouth of a throat waiting to swallow us whole. Klein wanted to mark the area and return later, but command said to proceed. Always forward, never back. Inside, the air was colder than outside, almost freezing. Every sound echoed forever. You'd take one step and it would bounce back at you from a dozen directions. The walls glistened like they were wet, but when I touched them, they were dry and vibrating faintly, like a hum buried under the rock. We advanced slowly, sweeping each chamber. No bones, no tools, nothing alive, just more carvings. Only now the figures were changing. The tall ones no longer stood still. They were bending, reaching down toward the smaller ones. And those smaller ones were now gone, erased. as if scraped out of the stone itself. We were trained for insurgents, ambushes, traps, but this felt ancient, pre-human. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, certain we weren't alone. But the deeper we went, the heavier the silence became. It wasn't emptiness, it was waiting. By the time we set up our temporary base inside the main chamber, I could feel the mountain breathing. I know how that sounds. Crazy, but that's what it felt like. Every few seconds, the ground beneath us would shiver, not violently, just enough to make the loose gravel rattle. It came from below, from deep beneath the rock. We chalked it up to seismic activity, but deep down, none of us believed that. There was a pattern to it, a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. I remember sitting against the cold stone, checking my rifle and realizing how small I felt down there. Like we weren't soldiers anymore, just intruders. Strangers standing on something sacred and asleep. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that some things aren't meant to be disturbed, especially when they're still breathing. We stayed the night inside that stone mouth, though none of us really slept. The air in the chamber never moved. It had that stale, ancient taste, like air that hadn't been breathed in centuries. When I shut off my headlamp to rest my eyes, I could still see the outline of the carvings glowing faintly. Not light, more like memory burned into my vision. Around 0300 hours, a low rumble shook dust down from the ceiling. It wasn't enough to collapse anything, but it made the stone floor vibrate in a slow, steady rhythm. I thought it was thunder, until I remembered there was no sky above us. Klein muttered something about microquakes. Reyes didn't speak at all. I think every one of us knew it wasn't the earth shifting. It was something below the earth, turning in its sleep. At dawn, we pushed deeper. Command wanted confirmation of artifact presence, whatever that meant. The tunnel sloped downward, narrowing until we had to duck under arches of carved rock. My flashlight beam flickered whenever it hit the walls, like the stone absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The hum we'd heard the night before grew stronger the lower we went. It pulsed through my boots, matching that same heartbeat rhythm. Reyes started getting nosebleeds. Klein complained his headset kept picking up whispers. I told him it was feedback, but even I could hear faint words buried in the static. They weren't English. They weren't Spanish either. They were slower, heavier, like someone trying to speak through stone. Every time the sound came, the tunnel walls seemed to tremble with it. We found a staircase carved directly into the rock, spiraling down into blackness. No supports, no railings, just steps worn smooth by time. It looked impossible, like it had been melted into shape rather than chiseled. The deeper we descended, the warmer it got. That didn't make sense. It should have been freezing that far underground. My skin prickled as if the air itself was charged. Then the lights on our helmets dimmed to half strength. Batteries full, brand new. We replaced them twice. Same thing. The only light that didn't fade was coming from ahead. A faint amber glow pulsing like a heartbeat. We thought it was firelight. We were wrong. The staircase ended at a vast chamber, circular, at least 50 meters across. The glow came from fissures in the floor, lines of molten orange running like veins through the stone. In the center stood something that looked like an altar, though it was too massive to have been built by hand. It was a single block carved into the shape of two enormous hands meeting palm to palm, fingers fused together. Between those hands was a gap, maybe a meter wide, black as tar. Klein joked it looked like the world's biggest praying statue. But standing in front of it, I felt something, like static in my bones, a hum that matched my heartbeat exactly. Every instinct screamed to back away, but training kept me still. We set up equipment, cameras, ground-penetrating sensors, electromagnetic readers. All of them glitched instantly. The displays showed infinite depth beneath the chamber, as if the earth simply dropped away. The audio sensors picked up a repeating vibration at 19 hertz, just low enough to shake the body but not the ears. Rhea said that frequency messes with human perception. Maybe it was making us hallucinate, maybe not. Then the hum stopped. The silence that followed was so sudden it hurt. Even the static in the headsets cut out. I opened my mouth to say something and the floor answered before I could. One deep echoing crack rolled under our boots like thunder. The fissures widened. The orange light flared bright, then dimmed, then bright again, as though something below was breathing fire. Klein ordered extraction. We started hauling gear up the stairs fast, but every step echoed wrong. Too long, like the chamber had grown behind us. Halfway up, our radios came back online for 3 seconds. Enough time to hear a voice that wasn't command whisper. Stay. Then static. Reyes dropped his pack and bolted. I caught him halfway up, shaking, eyes wide like an animal's. He kept saying, "It's calling the stone." I didn't ask what that meant. I just pulled him the rest of the way until we reached daylight again. When we emerged, the valley looked different. The fog was gone, burned away by a sun that shouldn't have been that bright. The cliffs seemed taller, the shadows longer. Even the air felt heavy, like it carried sound that hadn't been made yet. Our extraction bird was overdue, and none of our beacons worked. We were alone on a mountain that wasn't on any map, standing above a tunnel that seemed to breathe. I remember looking back one last time and seeing dust rise from the entrance, small bursts like exhaled breath. And then, faint but clear, I heard it. One deep note, far below, like a bell made of stone being struck for the first time in 1,000 years. We stayed near the upper ridge as long as we could, but command went dark. No evac, no response, no signal. It was as if the whole mountain swallowed us the moment we touched the stone. We were supposed to hold position and wait for pickup, but Klein insisted we had to return to the chamber. We left gear behind, he said, but I could tell that wasn't the real reason. He kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected something to come crawling up the cliff behind us. We were exhausted, dehydrated, and the fog had started creeping back over the valley like it never left. Even worse, Reyes hadn't spoken in hours. He just stared at the mountainside, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, whispering something under his breath. We went back down the tunnel just before dusk, and that's when the real nightmare began. The hum returned halfway down. Not loud, not sharp, low and pulsing like a sleeping animal's breath. The deeper we went, the stronger it got. My bones started to ache, like the vibration wasn't just in the floor but inside me. We reached the main chamber just as the temperature dropped without warning. A cold so sudden it felt artificial. Our breath clouded the air, but the stone glowed faintly again. Those veins of molten orange still pulsing beneath our boots. Klein radioed in a code black anomaly, even though no one would hear it. He tried to joke, "At least we'll go down as a weird footnote." No one laughed. Then came the first tremor. Short, violent. The whole chamber rattled. A section of the wall cracked in front of us, thin lines zigzagging like veins of glass. Then, silence. We turned to call Reyes, but he was gone. Just gone. His rifle lay against the wall where we'd stopped earlier. 1 second he was behind us, the next, nothing, no footsteps, no cry, no echo. Klein swore under his breath and told us to split into pairs and sweep the chamber. That's when we heard it, a distant roar, deep, hollow, not animal and not mechanical. Something ancient. It came from the walls, or under them, or maybe from inside them. We froze. Then another tremor hit, this one harder, longer. Chunks of dust fell from the ceiling like ash. We regrouped instantly. Everyone was ready to leave. Even Klein didn't argue. We started moving toward the stairs. That's when we found Reyes, or what was left of where he'd been. His body was pinned in a crevice along the chamber floor, flattened against the rock like he'd been dropped from a mile above. No blood, no debris, just the impression of his gear crushed into stone. But here's the thing, there was no sign of a cave-in. No rocks, no collapse. It was as if the floor itself had risen up and hit him. I couldn't breathe. Klein didn't speak. He just looked at the mark on the floor and then back toward the altar in the center of the room. I thought we'd leave right then, run screaming if we had to. But he stood still and whispered, "I think it's waking up." His voice cracked halfway through, like saying the words made it more real. I remember wanting to be sick but being too afraid to move. We camped near the tunnel mouth that night, too shaken to try and climb out in the dark. The fog had thickened, swallowing the ridgeline. None of us slept. Every sound echoed like a footstep. I swear I heard stone grinding just beyond the range of our flashlights. Once I caught movement, something enormous shifting between the trees on the cliffside. But when I pointed it out, it was gone. Klein stayed up, rifle ready, scanning the darkness like a man watching his own execution approach. No one else said it, but I think we all felt it. Something was out there now. Not in the ruins. Not in the tunnels, out, loose and moving. Something too big to hide, but somehow staying just out of reach. By morning, the mountain had changed again. The landscape didn't match our GPS files. Rock formations had shifted. The ridgeline where we landed was gone, or at least we couldn't find it. Even the sun felt wrong, rising behind a peak that hadn't been there before. We tried climbing to signal for extraction, but the fog followed us higher, clinging to us like smoke. And all the while, we kept hearing it. Stone dragging against stone, trees shaking without wind, shadows moving against the slope, slow, enormous. Too big to be a person, too fluid to be a machine. I thought about Reyes, about the way his body looked, not torn, not shot, but folded into the earth like paper. Something had grabbed him, something had crushed him, and we were still here, still being watched. That evening, Klein broke silence. "We're not going to survive this unless we hurt it," he said. No one argued. We had nothing but small arms, a few grenades, and one pack of C4. Not enough to dent a tank, let alone a creature made of mountain. But he had a plan. If we could lure it into the chamber, we could bring the roof down, maybe trap it again. "If it bleeds, we'll never see it," he said. "But if it's made of stone, we can bury it." I didn't say it aloud, but I already knew. We weren't going to kill this thing. We were just trying to stop it from getting any farther. Because whatever had been buried in that mountain wasn't just ancient. It was angry, and it was waking up fast. We spent the entire day preparing the chamber for what we hoped would be our trap. C4 along the weakened stone arches, frag grenades in the upper crevices, and our last 2 thermite sticks wedged under a carved beam that looked like it hadn't moved in 1,000 years. None of it felt like it would matter. We'd all seen pieces of the thing now. An arm dragging through the tree line, a footprint that spanned nearly 2 meters. Its presence wasn't just seen, it was felt. Every step it took made the ground hum like an old machine restarting after centuries of rest. The deeper we went into the chamber that evening, the more the walls seemed to pulse. The carvings glowed faintly, like veins beneath skin. Klein didn't talk much anymore. He just moved with focus, quiet, cold, and resigned. He knew we weren't getting out. This wasn't a war anymore. This was a burial. We posted up at the tunnel entrance, gear loaded and weapons ready. The sun had set, though you wouldn't know it from down here. There was only that awful pulsing glow from the altar, and the silence. A terrible silence. It felt wrong, like the world had gone still just to listen. And then it came. First, the tremor. Soft at first, then heavier. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The floor vibrated. My teeth buzzed. Then we saw it. Not all at once, not in full. Just pieces. An arm of gray-black stone, as thick as a tree trunk, sliding across the tunnel mouth. It didn't scrape the walls. It flowed like a limb covered in ancient skin. Then came the sound, a deep harmonic moan that vibrated inside my chest. No creature I've ever known should make that noise. It wasn't a roar. It was mourning. Or fury, or both. Klein opened fire first. I followed. The whole team lit it up with everything we had. M4s, LMGs, sidearms. Sparks flew where bullets hit like we were shooting a tank. No damage, just noise. The thing pulled back into the dark, then surged forward with terrifying grace. It moved like a statue being puppeted by gravity. Wrong angles, slow, and then suddenly fast. It didn't stomp or thrash. It pressed forward, forcing the very stone to shift around it. The air grew thick with dust and static. My ears popped. Then it raised one arm and slammed it into the floor. The whole chamber shook. Our explosives detonated prematurely. The first wave of C4 buckled a wall, but barely phased the thing. That was when I knew. This wasn't some ancient idol. This was a being built from the bones of the earth itself. Klein shouted for fallback. We retreated toward the outer shaft, trying to draw it in. We needed it under the structural weak point. The rest of the charges were wired for remote. My hands shook as I pressed the detonator, waiting for the exact moment. Then I saw it. The full shape. It stepped from the shadows, ducking under the arched tunnel as if it had done so before, long ago. At least 20 feet tall, its surface cracked and glowing with the same orange light as the fissures. Its face wasn't a face, just smooth stone where eyes should have been, and a deep hollow in the center of its head like a cracked bell. And from that hollow came the hum, the same one we'd heard from the beginning, but now it was louder, more focused, and it made us bleed. Our ears bled first. Then our eyes watered. I dropped to my knees, vision spinning. I could feel my memories slipping. I remembered voices that weren't mine, places I'd never seen. It was like the sound was trying to rewrite us. That's when Klein ran forward, no hesitation, and fired his last grenade into the chamber roof. I hit the switch at the same time. The ceiling caved in almost instantly, a roaring cascade of ancient stone and smoke. The giant didn't scream. It didn't even move. It just stood there, looking at us with that blank, unreadable silence as the mountain swallowed it whole. The dust choked us out. The light vanished. And then, quiet. It took hours to climb back out through the auxiliary shaft, hours spent half-blind and coughing blood. We lost 2 more men to falling debris. Only 3 of us made it back to the upper ridge. No signal, no evac, just sky. Klein was gone, buried with it. We waited 3 days before a drone finally spotted us. When the chopper came, they didn't ask questions. They didn't even check our IDs. They flew us to Lima, stripped our gear, and put us in separate debriefing rooms for 18 hours. Then they erased the mission, wrote it off as a weather-related training accident. I asked about the ruins. They just looked at me and said, "There are no ruins." But I saw the fear in their eyes. They knew. They just didn't want it spoken. I never saw the other survivors again. I heard rumors. 1 discharged, 1 dead in a motel room 6 months later. Heart attack, they said. I've moved 5 times since then. Tried to live quietly. But some nights, when the air is too still and the ground too quiet, I swear I hear it again. That hum. Low, deep, and growing louder. And I wonder if it ever really stopped, or if we just buried it under enough stone to make us feel safe for a little while. We didn't walk away from that mountain. We escaped it, or maybe it let us go. I still don't know which. All I remember is crawling out of that auxiliary shaft with blood in my ears, dirt in my mouth, and my mind torn into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. The fog was gone, but the silence was still there, deeper now, heavier, like the whole valley was holding its breath. There were only 3 of us left, myself, Ramos, and Lee. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. The looks on our faces said everything, that we had seen something the human mind wasn't designed to witness. That the weight of it had crushed something inside us that would never grow back. We set up a basic survival shelter a few 100 meters from the ridge and lit a fire more for comfort than heat. The satellite phone was dead. All the radios were fried. My watch still blinked EAR 00, like time had stopped the moment the stone began to sing. For 3 days we sat up there watching the skies, afraid to sleep. I remember the second night. Lee started praying in Korean, hands shaking, tears running down his face. Ramos just stared at the trees. His hands never left his rifle, even when he closed his eyes. I stayed awake the whole time, listening for tremors. I didn't believe it was over. I still don't. When the drone found us, we didn't celebrate. The buzzing overhead felt like an omen, not rescue. The bird dropped supplies and a beacon. 12 hours later, 2 Black Hawks appeared at dawn. Men in black gear with no markings climbed out. They didn't speak much. No medics, no questions. They zip-tied our hands, blindfolded us, and loaded us into separate aircraft. Standard containment protocol. That's when I knew for sure. We hadn't found something new. We'd rediscovered something that had been buried on purpose. And now we were loose ends. They flew us to a base in Lima I'd never seen before. Underground. Clean. Fluorescent. Cold. They called it a debrief. It felt more like interrogation. I spent 18 hours in a concrete room with one man asking the same questions in different ways. What did you see? How deep was the chamber? What triggered the collapse? I answered honestly. I told him about the humming, the carvings, the thing that moved like living stone. He never reacted, just wrote in his little black notebook and said, "You're not the first." I asked what that meant. He said nothing. Ramos and Lee were both gone when I was finally escorted out. I don't know if they were discharged, reassigned, or something worse. I asked to speak with them. The guard laughed. "They're not your concern anymore," he said. "They flew me back to the US under an alias, told me I'd suffered a psychological break due to altitude trauma and a training accident, gave me a medical discharge, pension, and a new identity. No interviews, no medals, no explanations, just silence. And that silence has been louder than any explosion I ever heard. For the first year, I barely slept. Every night I heard that low hum, the one from the altar, the one that made blood run from our ears. Sometimes it would come through the walls, sometimes through my dreams. I took sleeping pills until my liver nearly gave out. I tried to write it all down once. 30 pages in, the file corrupted, hard drive fried. My lights flickered. My dog barked at the hallway for 2 straight hours. I deleted everything the next morning. Some stories don't want to be told. I began to notice things after that. Surveillance vans parked too long across from my house. My phone would click when I wasn't speaking. Emails never arrived. One time I found my apartment door unlocked. Nothing missing, just moved. like someone had been inside, carefully searching, but also making sure I knew they'd been there. That was the worst part. The message was clear. We're watching. Keep quiet. Pretend it didn't happen. And for a long time I did. But silence is a funny thing. It doesn't just protect secrets. It rots people. I watched Lee's name come up in a military obit 2 years later. Died peacefully in his sleep. I knew that was a lie. Lee never slept peacefully again. Ramos vanished completely. No record, no trace. I contacted his sister once. She said someone from the government told her he'd been reassigned to a deep-sea radar lab. He hated water. Never learned to swim. It didn't make sense. None of it does. I started sketching the giant, the altar, the chamber. Over and over. Same lines, same angles. I'd wake up to find drawings I didn't remember making. Hundreds of them. Tucked under my bed, behind the fridge, even on the inside of my closet door. Always the same shape. The stone face with no eyes and the bell-shaped hollow in the head. It didn't feel like I was remembering. It felt like I was being reminded. Once I took one of the drawings to a museum curator in Denver. Told him it was inspired by Incan ruins. He went pale. Said it looked more like pre-Incan lithic work, something older from before recorded South American history. He asked where I'd seen it. I said, in a dream. He nodded like he understood, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew something too, or at least recognized that shape. He never returned my follow-up calls. The nightmares got worse after that. Not violent, not bloody, just cold and filled with sound. In one dream, I stood in the valley again, alone. The sky above me frozen mid-motion, clouds hanging like a paused video. Beneath my feet, the ground vibrated. And from under the stone, I heard a voice. A deep, resonant voice, slow, ancient, and speaking in syllables that didn't belong to any language I know. But I understood the message. You opened the gate. I tried therapy. The VA doctor was kind but skeptical. When I described the stone giant, she asked if I read H.P. Lovecraft. When I told her the humming followed me home, she recommended a psychiatrist. Eventually, I stopped going. It's hard to get help when everyone thinks your trauma is fiction. Easier to smile, nod, and swallow the fear like a pill. The silence becomes your survival instinct. But there's one thing I never told anyone. Not the interrogators. Not the doctor. Not even my brother, who's the only person I trust. The stone giant. When I saw it full in that chamber, as it stepped beneath the arch and faced us, I felt something else. Recognition. It wasn't just looking at me. It knew me, knew all of us. Like we weren't strangers, but descendants. Intruders returning to something we'd once sealed away, long before history could remember. Some days I wonder if that's why the mission was so vague. Why we were sent with such minimal intel. Maybe we weren't meant to succeed. Maybe we were a test, or bait, see if it was still alive, if it would respond. And now that it has, what comes next? Was burying it enough, or did we just wake it up enough to listen again? I still live off-grid. Moved out to the northern edge of Washington state, quiet, isolated. I don't own a phone, no Wi-Fi, solar panels and a well. The locals think I'm just another PTSD case trying to disappear. Maybe they're right. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me home. And every time the ground shakes, even a little, I get that tightness in my chest like something is pushing against the surface of the world, just waiting to be let back in. Sometimes, I sit outside at night and stare at the mountains, listening for the hum. And sometimes I hear it, faint just under the wind, low, steady. Like stone grinding beneath soil, a warning, a heartbeat, a memory. Whatever it is, I don't think it sleeps anymore. And the scariest part, I don't think it was ever just one.